that is keeping this country America, and the America we've always known is President Donald Trump.
He said, I am no longer going to allow the American worker to be taken advantage of.
Any of your favorite Trump campaign people are on the new app called Parler.
These sort of deep state, DC swamp creature, former intelligence people, all this nonsense, pushing back on Trump's agenda, which is putting America first.
I am here as your president to proclaim before the country and before the world, this monument will never be desecrated. These heroes will never be defaced. On this wonderful day, we celebrate our history, our heroes, our heritage.
On Independence Day, I took a moment just to really appreciate and thank law enforcement for the job they do.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
I am here as your president to proclaim before the country and before the world, this monument will never be desecrated. These heroes will never be defaced. Their legacy will never, ever be destroyed. Their achievements will never be forgotten. And Mount Rushmore will stand forever as an eternal tribute to our forefathers and to our freedom. We are the nation that gave rise to the Wright brothers, Harriet Tubman, George Patton, the great Louis Armstrong, Elvis Presley, Ella Fitzgerald. We settled the Wild West, won 2 world wars, landed American astronauts on the moon. Centuries from now, our legacy will be the cities we built, the champions we forged, the good that we did, and the monuments we created. America's destiny is in our sights. America's heroes are embedded in our hearts. America's future is in our hands. And ladies and gentlemen, the best is yet to come.
Thank you for watching War Room Weekly.
When it turns out that Donald Trump's campaign platform was the prescription for the American worker.
He is quite clearly the leader to return us to that stature.
Tim, clearly Joe Biden has lost touch with reality.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a good night. Hello and welcome to another edition of Team Trump Online's War Room Weekly, where we take a closer look at the contrast between President Trump's excellent record of accomplishment for the American people versus Joe Biden's record of failure and terrible ideas for the future. I'm Tim Murtaugh, Communications Director for the Trump 2020 campaign, and we are joined today by Georgia State Representative Vernon Jones, a Democrat. Good to see you, Representative Jones. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Sure. And Matt Schlapp, the chairman of the American Conservative Union. Matt, good to see you.
Good to be with both of you guys. You guys are doing great, and it's my honor to be here.
Well, thank you both very much. Representative Jones, let's start with you. It was a brave and bold move for you, an elected Democrat in Georgia, to stand up and endorse President Donald Trump for re-election. Why did you do that?
You know, first of all, I've always enjoyed the reputation of working on both sides of the aisle, being bipartisan. But what I like most about President Trump, he gets results. When he says he's going to do something, he goes and get it done. And that's different from what you're hearing from Washington these days. And, I can look directly into not only the African-American community, but across the country. Everybody has benefited from him in the past 3.5 years. He's had a good plan in terms of economic development, a good plan in terms of job creation, certainly prior to the pandemic. But at the same time, this president has made it clear that other countries will not be taking advantage of us. He's tough on crime. He's renegotiated some trade deals. He's got America going in the right direction. So he deserves another 4 years.
And I mean, we of course agree with all those sentiments. And Matt, as a leader in the conservative movement all across this country, this must be great for you to see people even being able to cross partisan lines and agree that this president has done a great job.
Look, I think this is a critical moment, and it's I really mean it. It's my honor to be here with Representative Jones, because it takes real political courage these days. It shouldn't, but it does take real political courage to have the audacity to reach across the aisle and say, we can agree on things like, let's put America first. We can agree on things like, let's have jobs for the people we work with and the people we represent. Let's make sure that we don't have lawlessness and that we uphold order in our streets. And let's make sure that the family is the foundation for everything we do in society, that we uphold people's religious freedoms, that we follow the Constitution. And I just have so much respect. It is so hard for Democrats who know that their party has turned so hard left, so radicalized, so socialist. It's so hard for them to watch it, that they're actually in this interesting position, and they're watching people like Vernon Jones and saying, look, I'm not a socialist. I'm just a moderate Democrat. Maybe I'm for a little bit more of a safety net or a little bit more government than maybe a lot of the Republicans I know, but I'm not for what the Democratic Party is becoming. So I think what Vernon Jones is doing, and others as well, who we see and we read about, I think there's a lot of minority voters, immigrants, who are looking at the state of things in our streets and in our country, and I think they're going to be supporting Donald Trump in numbers that no poll can possibly capture.
Yeah, and I think we can see by the reaction of the media and by a lot of Democrats who are willing to speak about it publicly that they are, in fact, concerned about the great inroads that President Trump has made among black voters and among Latino voters and all across the board. So I think that that's undeniably true. So let's talk about recent current events. It's been almost a week since the July 4th holiday, but still the media and Joe Biden are lying about President Trump's great speech at Mount Rushmore. It was a speech that expressed pride in the United States of America and about our founders and our foundational ideals, and the truth that America has done more to advance individual liberties than any nation in the history of this planet. The president also talked about the left-wing mobs that are out there toppling statues and actually trying to delegitimize America's very existence. And that, the media said, was dark and divisive. President Trump didn't start this culture war, but he will fight it. Representative Jones, from your perspective in Georgia, the culture war is going on, and President Trump is the one who has just decided, you know what, this is where we're going to draw the line.
You know, that's why I was saying earlier that I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. They've gone so far left. They're embracing socialism, Marxist and anarchy. They have literally gone off the cliff. When you see the major cities around the country that has to deal with these Antifa guys and the ones who literally have come over and taken over city blocks and they're tearing down statues, and literally the Democratic Party or the leadership, which are mostly Democrats, they're rolling out a red carpet for them. Oh yeah, come in, we'll give you restrooms. We won't even allow the police to come in and do anything to you. That is literally destroying our cities. And President Trump, being a man of law and order, it's saying, look, if you don't want to do anything about it, let us do something about it. But I think the left really want this country to become destructive. Certainly during this election season, they don't want to open up for business. They're trying to do everything they can to not denounce all of the destruction from these wild groups with these far left ideas. They want to see this president lose the election. In doing so, they don't care if they hurt the American people, because it's about politics. They're playing politics and making political decisions really as it relates to public safety and public health. This president is on target. He's striking a good balance between law and order, maintaining and listening to his scientists about the pandemic crisis and addressing that, but also opening this country back up so we can really focus on getting people back to work, opening these businesses again, getting people an opportunity to pay for their mortgage and pay for their kids to go to school, getting us back to work. So it's kind of interesting how the liberal media really, there's nothing he can do that's right. If he walked on water, then they would say he couldn't swim.
Yeah, I think you've got that about right. And so, Matt, when you read the media's coverage of the president's speech, and it was all full of great words and how we all take inspiration from the ideals that this country was founded upon. And then the president, of course, rightly pointed out what Representative Jones just was describing. The leftist Antifa type mobs who are, by the way, aligned with Joe Biden, roaming the country. And when the president says, "Look, we're not going to accept that," the media says, "Oh my gosh, he's being divisive." And now, in your view, the president didn't start this culture war, but he's sure as heck going to fight it, right?
Yeah, no, that's completely right. The reason why Mount Rushmore was the exact perfect place for the president to speak to all Americans is, number one, he's trying to unify us. The press is saying that he's dividing us. That's untrue. He's the presidential candidate standing up for the Union. And that's what Mount Rushmore is all about. Two of our founders, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. And as we know, George Washington freed his slaves in his will upon the death of his wife, Martha. Then it captures this terrible moment in our history, the Civil War, and Abraham Lincoln's leadership, which was about preserving the Union, bringing us all back together after we get rid of the scourge of slavery. And then who's the fourth person on Mount Rushmore? It's Teddy Roosevelt, a progressive Republican who was the president who allowed the first African-American to sit down to dinner with the president of the United States. It's a beautiful story of our founding, getting over the Civil War, and then moving on to this idea of a modern society where we have tolerance and acceptance. But you know what? You know why the Democrats are against Mount Rushmore, and why Joe Biden will not call out this mob, and why Joe Biden will not call for law and order? It's because they don't believe in the Union anymore. They're the ones who are literally trying to split us apart gay and straight, split us apart black and white, split us apart woman and man, split us apart in every way they can. And that's why I need to hear those words from my president. When it's about coming together, even with our differences, and doing the right thing for our kids and our grandkids going forward.
Yeah, a footnote.
Go ahead.
I was going to say a footnote to what Matt was saying too. It also represents birth, development, and preservation. Those three concepts. And this president could not have picked a more better backdrop. These are amazing figures. Are they perfect? No, but they represent major times in this country, and they made major contributions. I was proud of his speech. I was inspired by his speech. How could you not? And no other president has ever given that type of event there. That's a national monument. People of all walks of lives go there. Black, white, brown, national, international people. So now it's almost like there's a negative connotation with Mount Rushmore because the president went there. Well, wow, if the president went anywhere, they would make something of it. So it's just disappointing that it's all tied to the election. It's not tied to the American pride that I feel. It's not tied to our country so great and how we can make it even greater. It's about this election. And Joe Biden has failed. He's failed in public policy. He's failed the American people. He's had 49 years. And the only thing you can really point to his, in terms of achievements, as I see it, was the crime bill. But look how detrimental that was. That destroyed American families. It separated African Americans. It was mass incarceration. And it was President Trump who understood that those laws were just too, the crime didn't fit the time. And people need a second chance. And with his First Step program, that literally restored people back with their families, reunited them. They got jobs. They're more productive now. But every area this president has touched, though, it has made it better. The job market, small businesses, big businesses, giving them breaks, redoing the treaties where America's not being taken advantage of, standing up to these bullies around the world. This president has been as solid as Stone Mountain. And I too, Matt, I agree. Preserving these monuments, regardless of what may have been a part of that person's life at a particular time, nobody's perfect. You can track any and everybody, but if we destroy the past, our children will have no idea of knowing where we've come from and who made contributions. And so I support the president. I was talking a couple of years ago in the legislature about creating a memorial garden in all those states who do not want their statues, if they're lawfully removed, and they should be if that's the case, but have them to come to a memorial garden so we can really have them there, preserve them. Kids can learn about them. And one final thing on that note, we give millions of dollars to universities and colleges and nonprofit groups to go around the world digging for what? Artifacts and statues. Many of those statues they found, they were slave owners, if you go back. And we're looking, we preserve them. It's important. So why is it on one hand we're talking about destroying statues, and on the other hand we're spending $1 million to find and dig for years and years and years, even finding a spoon or a miniature statue. That's history. Those are artifacts.
That is a great point. And you know, the other thing, Vernon and Tim, is it was never about trying to get rid of the history of the Confederacy. They acted like that was the reason. What these radicals want to do, and what we can see now, it's about our founders. It's about George Washington. It's about Betsy Ross and the flag that she sat there and stitched. And now it's about statues of Jesus, statues of Mary, saints of the church. They beheaded the Stations of the Cross at a cemetery in the last couple days. These people hate the foundations of Western civilization. They hate Christopher Columbus, who brought Christianity to this part of the world. They hate everything about America. And I think most Americans, they know their country isn't perfect. There are things I'd like to change about America. But you know what? I'm so proud to be American. And it's time for us to stand up for our country. And I'm proud that we have a president who will say and do the things that must be done.
Don't forget about Frederick Douglass.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they went after Frederick Douglass as well.
Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass.
Martin Luther King's going to be next.
They even went after Jimmy
Where do they
Hendrix.
stop? That's
These
the
people
question.
are
Where does it
crazy.
stop? Yep. So, as we have said, these groups are clearly aligned with Joe Biden. So let's hear from Joe Biden, who's the Democrat candidate for president. In his July 4th message to the country, nowhere in this video, of course, he did it by video because he doesn't come out of his basement to go actually meet Americans and actually campaign for the office that he's seeking. So he released a little video on July 4th. And during the course of this, he could not find 2 seconds to express pride in the United States. Let's listen to this.
Our country was founded on an idea. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We've never lived up to it. Jefferson himself didn't. He held slaves. Women were excluded. The dogs of Bull Connor, the assassination of Martin Luther King, and more than 200 years of systemic racism. And just weeks ago, the murder of George Floyd. Through it all, these words have gnawed at our conscience and pulled us towards justice. American history is no fairy tale. It's been a constant push and pull between the two parts of our character. The idea that all men and women, all people are created equal, and the racism that has torn us apart.
And so this is Joe Biden. This is a man who wants to be president, and he can't find the time in his little video to say he's proud of this country. We've never lived up to it, he says. And in his view, the United States of America was broken in the beginning. It stayed broken for 244 years, and it's broken today. Matt, you've been watching politics for a long time. Have you ever seen a candidate for president of the United States who on July 4th could not bring himself to say that he has pride in America?
Yeah, no, this is, Tim, you've captured it. This is why this is such a radical time. You have a nominee from one of the two major parties basically running down America, blaming America. By the way, Thomas Jefferson, who he criticized, wrote one of the most beautiful documents in the history of mankind that Martin Luther King Jr. said was a promissory note on the equal treatment of all people at some point in the future. Everybody who was involved in the founding of our country, everybody knew that slavery was the big birth defect, right? They all understood it, even those folks who were supporting slavery. They even realized when they said a black man was 3/5 of a person, they knew that would not stand. And they created a part of the Constitution that allowed for a majority of the Americans to make amendments to the Constitution. And I will remind you, the Republican Party proudly stood up against slavery. We passed 3 amendments to the Constitution to end slavery, to give civil rights to former slaves, to give them the vote. And then we led the way on putting, to strike through the heart, Jim Crow and all those terrible illegal laws. The Republican Party has a very proud history here. Americans generally have a very proud history. We created our country in a time when slavery was ubiquitous, and we led the way on making it illegal. And now we are the most tolerant, diverse, accepting society on the globe. But it's not enough for Joe Biden. He wants to transform America. And remember, Tim, we're old enough to go through a dictionary and look up words. Transform means fundamentally change. It means scrap America and start with this new Marxist country built in the image of the radicals we're seeing on the streets.
Yeah, and I think, I don't think there's anybody who would tell you that America is perfect now or has ever been perfect, but it's only the best country that has ever been tried on the face of the earth. And so, Representative Jones, is it a case where Joe Biden just can't say that he's proud of America because he knows he would face the backlash from the left? Is that what it is?
Well, he's really talking about himself, Joe Biden being a Democrat, because as Matt said earlier, it was the Democrats that opposed the freeing of slaves. It was Democrats that started the Ku Klux Klan. It was Democrats, one by the name of Margaret Sanger, who founded a group called Planned Parenthood and said that blacks and others were human weeds and that we were defected and we needed to be eradicated, literally going out having abortions and sterilizing black women. It was mostly Democrats who fought against the Voters' Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. And it was Joe Biden, who his best good friend, Robert Byrd, who was a card-carrying KKK member and ran one of the local chapters. And he actually spoke at his funeral and talked about what a great role model and a great friend Robert Byrd was. And then finally, that same Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, when they passed the crime bill, Hillary Clinton and others called black men super predators. And then that same Joe Biden said recently on a show that if you don't vote for him, you ain't black. Well, first of all, ain't black is trying to talk jive, and that's offensive right there.
Doesn't work for Joe Biden.
Doesn't work for Joe Biden. And the other thing, that shows that they think they have a captive audience, the Democrats do, that if you're black, first of all, we don't have to earn your vote. You are going to vote Democratic. And when you come off that plantation, think independently, the Democratic Party has the issue with it. It's not a tent of diversity. It's not a big tent, because if you're black and you have independent thought with conservative leanings, you're not allowed to be in the party. As a matter of fact, you're an embarrassment. And Matt, you remember Governor Zell Miller.
Yes.
I want to point to some more bigotry within the Democratic Party. Zell Miller was a Democrat. He came out and supported President Bush. Not a word of it. Even spoke at the Republican convention. Not a word of it. But me, being black and a Democrat, when I came out to support Donald Trump, I'm an embarrassment to the party. I don't share the party's values and ideas. They've even made excuses for Democrat congressional representations we've had in Georgia that were conservative Democrats, but they were white. They still got a pass. They didn't hold them accountable. They didn't disassociate them with the party. But that's what I was trying to say earlier about how all the attacks that I've gone under, I horrify white liberals who just used to counting on us and knowing that we're going to be there. But In the midst of that, what did they do? They put illegals before us. Matter of fact, they put illegals before the American people, period. And all these other specialized groups and their agenda. But the backbone of the Democratic Party has been blacks. And so now me and others who are breaking that mold, they are really scared of it. They don't know what to do. And they painted that narrative, include the media, liberal media. They do not want blacks like me on their networks saying that I'm for Donald Trump and the Democrats are a party of bigotry.
Yeah, there's no question. You represent, as a black Democrat, an existential threat to Joe Biden and his candidacy and the Democrat Party. There's no question. Let's talk about the setting for President Trump's speech. We've already touched on it. And Mount Rushmore, of course, featuring George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. Here is how the media described it when President Trump visited versus how they viewed it before.
And Jake, kicking off the Independence Day weekend, President Trump will be at Mount Rushmore, where he'll be standing in front of a monument of 2 slave owners and on land wrestled away from Native Americans, told that be focusing on the effort to, quote, tear down our country's history.
And so here we are, celebrating the birth of a nation, independence for white men, at a site described by one Native American activist as, quote, a symbol of white supremacy. Trump choosing Mount Rushmore for a 4th of July campaign stop is just like when he chose Tulsa, the site of the 1921 massacre against black Americans, for his Juneteenth weekend rally. It's that cruel, tired, and familiar jab to black, brown, and indigenous people that makes the shrinking MAGA voter feel as big as a 60-foot face of a colonizing slave owner.
This is our country at its very best. What an incredible achievement.
Visiting Mount Rushmore today, Bernie Sanders taking in the majesty of the moment, this monument to 4 great American presidents.
Just the accomplishment and the beauty. It really does make one very proud to be an American.
So, quite a juxtaposition there. You couldn't see it any more clearly. Mount Rushmore, when Democrats visit, like Bernie Sanders, it's fantastic. It's majestic. When Donald Trump visits, it's a monument to white supremacy. So, Representative Jones, the way the media looks at this, what changed about Mount Rushmore?
First of all, again, it's the liberal media. But isn't it amazing for them to embrace Mount Rushmore when Bernie Sanders is there and he's proud to be American? But when Donald Trump is there, wait a minute, there's some racism here. He's standing before these 2 slave owners. Wait a minute, Abraham Lincoln is there too. Did he not free the slaves? Why didn't they appeal to the good side of it? He's here right now in front of President Abraham Lincoln, who's probably one of the greatest presidents we've ever had. Teddy Roosevelt, at the same time, was the great conservationist, first one that really started to preserve and conserve land. You would think the liberals would like that, but no, it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump can literally stand in front of Starbucks coffee, and then all of a sudden everyone hates Starbucks coffee.
Yeah.
There's nothing he can do. There's nowhere he can go. There's no monument he can stand in front of. He can't even go down to one of our national parks. Isn't it a federal park? Parkland?
I believe
what do
it
we
is,
normally
yes.
do in the holidays? We go to our national parks and our state parks. It's just downright, we call it just hate. It's just hate for Donald Trump.
It's pretty remarkable. Matt, I mean, Representative Jones just mentioned Starbucks in that answer. Can you imagine if President Trump came out with a Starbucks cup in his hand and was drinking it on camera one day? Imagine that. Twitter would explode. Everybody would be trying to cancel Starbucks all of a sudden. So, I mean, the double standard. There you see, there could not be a more magnificent example of how ridiculous the media looks and how they beclown themselves when they love one thing when somebody else does it, a Democrat. And they call a monument to white supremacy the moment that Donald Trump sets foot there. Could you think of a better example?
What Vernon Jones has learned, what I have learned, what all of us around the country who are standing up for Donald Trump has learned is that the fake news media tells us that we're fascists, that we want to control people's thoughts, that we want to control people's lives. It's the lefties who are the fascists. And do you know what the first thing the fascists do? They rip down the history because they've got to recreate the history in the image of their graven images. You know the second thing the fascists do? They propagandize everybody. They lie with these smooth and silky words to try to make us feel like what we know to be true in our heart is actually wrong. And so when you see them propagandize, they can in one moment say it's great when Bernie Sanders goes to Mount Rushmore as an achievement of American ingenuity and the beauty of our history. Donald Trump goes there and it's racism. And that is how their coverage is on each and every issue. You know, when I went to the Tulsa rally, Tim, that plane was filled with African Americans, many Democrats who support Donald Trump. The press wouldn't cover that story. Part of the trip to Tulsa was an acknowledgement that not only Juneteenth is a part of our history, it's a Republican part of our history with Abraham Lincoln leading the charge. We can think of Tulsa about race riots, or we can think about Tulsa as a community that came together after the race riots, black, brown, white, the whole rainbow coming together to create a great Midwestern city. I grew up in that part of the country. These are good people. The media wants to make everybody in red country be racist and, you know the word, deplorable.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So let's talk about. Go ahead, Representative.
I was going to say a footnote to that. Again, it's, you know, once you become confined, you become defined. Let me reverse that. Once you become defined, you become confined to that definition. They have literally boxed in President Trump as a racist. No matter how much he's done good for African Americans, no matter how much he's improved their lives in terms of job employment and other opportunities, he's a racist. But Joe Biden, who really has a record of being a racist, who really has a record of destroying black lives, who has a record of saying like, again, you ain't black if you don't vote for him, or if you vote for Republicans, they're going to put you back in chains, which, again, he is the racist, but he gets a free pass. President Trump actually has done more to help and change the African American community than any other president going back to the Civil Rights Act, I should say, and not a word about his record and support of African Americans. They literally want black people to hate President Trump, and they want us to like Joe Biden, even though Joe Biden is not presidential. He's had 49 years and did nothing with it. It's just it's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Well, you mentioned the media and how the media wants to try to control people's thinking. So let's talk about the speech itself. We've already talked about Mount Rushmore and how the media viewed that one case, and then differently when President Trump goes there. But how about the speech itself? Here is how the media described that.
And so choosing this spot, built on sacred indigenous land that was seized illegally, and at a time when America finally faces a reckoning over its ugly racial history, wasn't just a wink at white supremacy. This was a rallying call.
Our nation is witnessing a merciless campaign to wipe out our history, defame our heroes, erase our values, and indoctrinate our children. Angry mobs are trying to tear down statues of our founders, deface our most sacred memorials, and unleash a wave of violent crime in our cities.
Trump's speech was an ugly and callous disregard of demands from social activists as well as health experts.
That message, what it sends right now is that the highest office in the land is a symbol for white supremacy, right? And the president is really leaning into a message of hate and racism, and you know that Mount Rushmore stands on lands that are sacred to the Lakota people, and it was just incredibly disturbing last night to see the messaging in that speech.
And real quick, let's see some actual clips from the actual speech and hear what the president really had to say.
We will proclaim the ideals of the Declaration of Independence, and we will never surrender the spirit and the courage and the cause of July 4th, 1776. Upon this ground, we will stand firm and unwavering in the face of lies, meant to divide us, demoralize us, and diminish us, we will show that the story of America unites us, inspires us, includes us all, and makes everyone free. We must demand that our children are taught once again to see America, as did Reverend Martin Luther King when he said that the founders had signed a promissory note to every future generation. Dr. King saw that the mission of justice required us to fully embrace our founding ideals. Those ideals are so important to us, the founding ideals. He called on his fellow citizens not to rip down their heritage, but to live up to their heritage. Above all, our children from every community must be taught that to be American is to inherit the spirit of the most adventurous and confident people ever to walk the face of the earth. Americans are the people who pursued our manifest destiny across the ocean, into the uncharted wilderness, over the tallest mountains, and then into the skies, and even into the stars. We are the country of Andrew Jackson, Ulysses S. Grant, and Frederick Douglass. We are the land of Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill Cody. We are the nation that gave rise to the Wright brothers, the Tuskegee Airmen, Harriet Tubman, Clara Barton, Jesse Owens, George Patton, General George Patton, the great Louis Armstrong, Alan Shepard, Elvis Presley, and Muhammad Ali. And only America could have produced them all. No other place. We are the culture that put up the Hoover Dam, laid down the highways, and sculpted the skyline of Manhattan. We are the people who dreamed a spectacular dream. It was called Las Vegas in the Nevada desert. Who built up Miami from the Florida marsh, and who carved our heroes into the face of Mount Rushmore. Make no mistake, this left-wing cultural revolution is designed to overthrow the American Revolution. In so doing, they would destroy the very civilization that rescued billions from poverty, disease, violence, and hunger, and that lifted humanity to new heights of achievement, discovery, and progress. To make this possible, they are determined to tear down every statue, symbol, and memory of our national heritage.
So there you have the proof that the media is in fact lying about what President Trump said at Mount Rushmore. Representative Jones, what the president really was doing was painting a picture of the history of this country, a country which has done more to advance the cause of liberty for individuals than any country in the history of the world. How do you think that the media got this somehow opposite idea?
Well, here's the trickery. They used a black female to keep using the words white supremacy. That was used to scare black people. That is keeping them on the plantation. There's nothing this president said that had anything to do with white supremacy, anything to do with slavery, anything to do with just being the worst person for black people to vote for. It was all about, we're afraid that Donald Trump is breaking into the base of that black vote. We have to do everything we can to keep him away. And when you use buzzwords like white supremacy, When you use buzzwords like the Confederacy, when you use all those buzzwords, that plays to people's fears. And that's the sad thing about it, Matt, because that same station would not allow a black man to come right on there and say, wait a minute, this president has helped black people. This president has done more in the black community than any other president in the past 40 years. I'm supporting this president, many others. That's why right now, many whites want to come out and say they're for Donald Trump, but they don't want to be called a racist. Many blacks want to come out and say, hey, I'm for Donald Trump, but I don't want to be called a Republican. And they play to that. And people just act literally embarrassed. They like this president. They like what he has to say, but they just don't want to be labeled. And that's the sad thing. And that's what the left media is doing.
Yeah, I think, and there's no question that these are all allies of Joe Biden. And if you watch this coverage and you hear the descriptions, Matt, I think it's pretty obvious which side is counting on Americans becoming divided and which side, of course, the president wants Americans to be united and proud of this country. I mean, it's fairly obvious right on its face, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the charge of racism, I know it's been leveled at me in the last few weeks. Because of my criticism of this angry mob and the Marxist leaders and founders of these criminals lighting fire to churches, taking down statues, all these dead young African-American kids in our major cities, including in your state, Representative Jones. Yeah. The African-American community, the immigrant community, the brown, the color of the rainbow, these are the victims of the crime that's been unleashed in these streets. And that has been unleashed, I believe, on purpose, because they are revolutionaries. They are trying to rip apart this country. And who's funding that? Too many corporations, too many of the elite, too many of the people who should know better, who have prospered from America, are now funding this violence, fomenting this revolution. And I look back at what the president said about the people who built up the marshes in Miami. You all know I'm married to Mercy, who has a proud Cuban heritage. They came to this country. They helped make Miami and Florida one of the most idyllic places on the face of the earth. And do you know what they all talk about when they get together? These immigrants who came from places like Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua and El Salvador, they've lived through Marxism. It makes everybody poorer. It makes everybody sicker. It has never worked any time, any place for anyone. And they look at what's happening in this country, and they are scared because they see this cancer of communism that they fled. All of a sudden it's here, and it's being pushed by a lot of white elites into our cities, and the victims will be people of color.
And you know, Black Lives Matter, when you look at what their founding purpose is, it's not about saving Black lives. It really isn't. When you start talking about Black Lives Matter, but it only matters if a white cop kills a black person. Here's all this outrage. Here's all of these protesters coming out and getting violent and breaking into businesses. And at the same time, we've had more Black lives lost because of Black Lives Matter in recent months, including in my state, the 8-year-old baby girl. Can you imagine shooting and killing an 8-year-old baby girl? Do all Black lives matter or just some Black lives matter? Because I didn't see any protest when it came to that baby girl losing her life. In Chicago, 14 plus people killed. I think it was a record number, including a 3-year-old black baby. Where was Black Lives Matter? They were nowhere to be found. And these groups who are funding Black Lives Matter, and Antifa and others who are infiltrating Black Lives Matter, and George Soros and others who are funding them, and these private companies, when you look at how much money they're raising, I cannot believe that the left, well, I can believe, but the media has not shown all of these corporations who's funding these companies, who's funding these organizations, who burning our cities literally, and embarrassing and shaming them into contributing to them, because they should not be contributing, because they're literally contributing to violence. I'll say this right now. The blood of a lot of these Black lives that are lost on the hands of these corporations who are funding these crazy anarchic groups that are literally burning our cities and destroying our communities. The blood is on their hands.
Vernon, what if they took those resources and helped build up and help and bring services to black families and funded these black pastors and black churches who are living in these communities, doing everything they can to hold it together? Can you imagine if the resources went to the people who are trying to heal America?
Or if you were to go to those same corporations and look at their corporate board and their executive management team, I bet you there's no diversity there. And to look at their suppliers, are they working and using a lot of small or black-owned businesses? You can help them a lot more that way than funding these Marxist groups who are out there who are just trying to destroy our culture as we know it. But I tell you, if someone were to examine them, Matt, I promise you, there would be no diversity there.
And the Marxist groups that you're talking about, these are the people who are aligned with Joe Biden. They would want to see Joe Biden elected president. And this is the defund the police crowd, people who believe that America is a fundamentally bad country at its founding and still today. And the fact is, and we're at our stage of final thoughts here for the show, but the fact is that Joe Biden is simply too weak to stand up to these extremists who are in his party. And Representative Jones, you have seen fit to stand up and support and endorse President Trump. And you must see this in Joe Biden, the weakness and his inability to stand up to these forces on the left.
Well, Joe Biden will not stand up to them because those are his votes. He doesn't want to offend them. But then we want to put President Trump on the spot to denounce this person and that person that has no connection with them, just exercising their freedom of speech. You know, this is coming down to divisiveness from the left, and they want to paint it as if it's the right. If you were to look at the record of President Trump and the records of the past administration, and you were to focus what has mostly helped the African-American community, the choice is clear. Remove all the rhetoric, all that he's been examining his record. And that's why we cannot, and the people cannot really see his record for what it is because of the divisiveness. They're using race, and race is overshadowing his record. That's why we have to continue to tell this story. And more African Americans need to stand up. More white Americans need, and who are Democrats too. And whites, don't worry about being called a racist. Stand up for what is right. I'm being called everything but a child of God. However, they know where I stand. I'm not backing down, and I'm standing up on principle. This president deserves to be reelected, and I'm going to do everything I can, Matt, over the next few months to ensure that my voice is loud and my voice is out there for the American people to come, and let's get Donald Trump, give him 4 more years. He has done, I'm going to end with this. Donald Trump went to Washington. Washington didn't change Donald Trump. Donald Trump changed Washington. And Donald Trump also changed the media. He put them on their heads with the fake news.
They did. And we certainly appreciate your bravery, Representative Jones, for coming out for Donald Trump. Matt, final thoughts. Joe Biden, just too weak. Too weak.
Yeah, let's face it. Joe Biden is in a diminished state. I watch these videos he puts out, many from Hunter Biden's former rec room. And I actually, I'm a decent enough person where I actually feel bad that they've propped him up to put him in this place. But let me tell you, at the American Conservative Union, we've gone through 40 years of his votes. And what you need to understand, it's not the left manipulating Biden, although he's diminished. Joe Biden is a hardcore left-wing politician who's been wrong on every major issue, including race, including criminal justice reform, and every other. He was against taking on the communists in Soviet Union by having the Reagan defense buildup. He's against taking on the communists in China and has been soft on them in every step of the way. In the end, you can think a lot of things about Joe Biden, but objectively, he's wrong on every major issue that faces this country, even on the question of life. His first year in the Senate, he voted, can you believe it, to rescind Roe v. Wade. By the very next year, because he took some guff, he became pro-choice, and we've seen in the last couple of years, he's now for Vernon Jones paying for everyone's abortions, and Tim Murtaugh and Matt Schlapp. He doesn't believe in even having religious freedom and conscience, where you don't have to pay for something you believe to be so morally abhorrent. The man is morally bankrupt, and he's passed this on to the next generation of the Biden family with the wrongdoing of Hunter, which we've seen overseas. We have seen enough to know that we should all listen to Vernon Jones and the other brave people of color who have stood up for Donald Trump. There are countless of them, Tim, and the polls will never properly count them, because if you're called an Uncle Tom or a racist, if you support a good man like Donald Trump, you know what you tend to do? Unlike Vernon Jones, most Americans have to be quiet because they could lose their job, they could lose their standing in polite society. Don't believe when you hear these people talking about what's going on around this country. I think a vast majority of Americans are looking at the chaos in the streets, the murder of these young kids, the ripping down of our founders, the attack on the church, now the call to break all the stained glass in our churches, all these biblical references. I think the American people have had enough of all this. They know Joe Biden is the beneficiary of all of it. Maybe he even likes a lot of it because he certainly won't call it out and he won't tell it to stop. So I think that we are in a very good place to take back our country. It's even bigger than the election of Donald Trump. It's whether America will continue on the course it was set upon 200 years ago.
Well, this has been a fantastic discussion, and I wish we had more time, but sadly we don't, and we have to stop it right there. So I want to thank you both. Two fantastic guests, a great conversation. Georgia State Representative Vernon Jones, a Democrat, thank you so much for your bravery, and thanks for being with us today. And Matt Schlapp, the chairman of the American Conservative Union, and we always appreciate your insight and your support, Matt. Good to see you both, and thank you again.
God bless Vernon Jones.
It's a brave thing you're doing, Representative Jones. I'll tell you that.
It is what it is.
All right. Thank you both.
That's
very
my
much.
country. It's all about my country.
Amen.
We invite all of our viewers to join us again next week for another edition of War Room Weekly here on Team Trump Online. Please, if you have a second, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel or like our page. And please don't forget to download the Trump 2020 app, which is truly the best way to stay connected to the campaign. You can volunteer, make voter phone calls from the comfort of your own home, and you can do all those things and earn points to win some great prizes, up to and including a picture of yourself with President Trump. And that's available in the app stores now. Thank you again. Until next week, I'm Tim Murtaugh with the Trump Campaign.